like what do you think our model looks like, and then some characterizations around like how we think poor people spend their money, how we think rich people spend their money, and then I'll go on to talk about how this affects foreign investment, domestic investment, and like outcomes for society. Alright, to begin with the model. So to begin with, just how does New Zealand tax work? So the way it works is like if someone is paying tax, if we have like a bottom tax bracket of say like 1%, they'll pay 1% plus $5,000 earned. And then if the next tax bracket is like 10%, they'll pay 10% on the money earned over $5,000, not all money earned. I think that's worth clarifying before we get into this debate. So in saying that, what does our model say? Well, we think we're going to have like more brackets so that we have like a smoother transition up an income ladder. For rich people and less tax for people with like a smaller income, and more like and the same for corporations. And we're going to have no tax so we have a livable income as an individual. Alright, so we have like no thank you. We have poor people in society. Under our side of the house, we think that spending the new money they have because they're like barely living above the poverty line, and so they need to spend most of their money to live. And we think they're interested in spending like at least some portion of the money they gain in buying like basic luxury goods, like maybe they're buying things like chocolate. Like it doesn't really matter what they're spending their money on, but we think they are going to spend at least most of it. We think rich people don't spend all of their money. They're earning, no thank you, they're earning lots of money, and we do not think they spend all of it because they have more than they need for the basic necessities of life. They have more than they need to like own a nice house and to eat nice food. They don't need to spend their money, but if they do, they spend it on luxury goods. Luxury clothes, we're looking at luxury cars, we're looking at like trips. So where do we see all this money going? It's going overseas. It's being spent on like Bugatti from Europe. It's being spent on like Gucci and Louis Vuitton from Europe. This money all leaves New Zealand, and that harms the people in New Zealand because none of that money goes to our government to like be spent on public infrastructure, and none of that money goes to people living in New Zealand to help them. And so when we raise these tax brackets, we think these rich people will stay in New Zealand because we have like an incredibly high quality of living. The country is nice. We have good air quality. We have good like nice like natural areas, and we think they're still able to earn money because the way like we told you right at the start that tax brackets work, like they only pay tax on that higher sections of income. Alright, how do we improve foreign investment? We have a larger market. More money. People are spending money in New Zealand. No, thank you. Because people have more disposable income, so they're going to spend more money. People are looking to invest. Alright, we have a more stable government. When the government is earning more money, they're able to like control things like rampant inflation and like instability, and investors are very stable investment, maybe a slightly lower return on investment. We can have like a much better public infrastructure when the government has more money. They're going to spend that money on things like better roads, on railway infrastructure, which makes like transport cheaper for these companies, but also we think they can spend things on like hydrogen, companies in doing, which not only provides energy, but provides cheaper energy when we're producing more of it, and this like decreases running costs for these companies. And also we see like an increase in education budget, which means we have more skilled workers, which provides like an avenue, thank you for these companies to like invest in New Zealand. Alright. And then even if we like don't set those, we think companies still come because they've had like a profit incentive. Companies are profit driven, and like at point in time so they can still earn money in the New Zealand market. They're interested in doing so. And given like how New Zealand tax brackets work, they're still able to earn like a considerable amount of money in the New Zealand market. Even if we see like certain businesses pulling out of the New Zealand market and like a decrease in foreign investment, when the government has more money, we think they're able to nationalise some non-participative like industries and businesses. We think, maybe if all of a certain type of business pulls out, they may be able to produce, they're likely able to produce a national equivalent. Okay. What are the outcomes here? We see much better, sure.
Yeah, so how does your side actually make it profitable for businesses to stay in the country?
Because they are only paying tax on that profit, and they only pay like a percentage of it. They still have a profit there. They have a profit. Okay, how do we see better government for New Zealanders? To begin with, they're earning more money because like they have these foreign investments. New Zealand, they're buying factories, paying workers, as that like increases the amount of money available to New Zealanders and increases the amount of money available to the government to start paying tax. We see an increase increase in like the number of jobs for New Zealanders because there are more businesses in the country, so they're able to get a job, they're more able to like move up in the world, like increases social mobility because they're able to get a job, they're able to get a high pay job. Also seeing a wider range of goods and services available to New Zealanders, because there's many businesses in New Zealand. So that's where this point stands. We see way better outcomes for everyone in New Zealand. But to move on, like next we have we have more domestic investment for similar reasons. We have lower corporate tax, like at those lower profit ranges, so small businesses are able to thrive. So like mom and pop businesses are able to thrive, so we see more domestic investment. We have a greater education system because there's more government spending on the education, and so like there are more people who have the skills like to start businesses and to run businesses. We have lower running costs of these businesses because of the things you mentioned earlier, like road and rail are giving like lower transport costs and like lower power costs when the government's investing more in energy. And these like companies are still earning less profit because of how our New Zealand tax rates work. So one of the outcomes similar to before, we have more jobs for New Zealanders. We see development for New Zealanders when they're able to like build themselves their career through like running a company and building it from like the ground up. And this is like very good for them. It's like really good on the resume. It provides lots of income for them. And also we see like an increase in the amount of money New Zealanders overseas, like an Australian market, and bring their profits back with them. And so yes, this point stands, we see better benefits for all of society. We win this debate. Alright, better outcomes for society. We have things like better transport infrastructure, provides a greater social mobility when people are able to move from like poorer regions to richer regions to access a better education. Like it's just more enjoyable for people. Like they don't have to spend hours in a commute every morning stuck in traffic. They're able to catch a bus, catch a train, and this is more enjoyable for people. You have a better education, you strive more a position where they're stuck in a poverty cycle, that family's been stuck in a poverty cycle, or able to access an education, access higher paying jobs, and like break out of this cycle and live a better life. We have a greater living standard for like the poorest among our societies, like those people living in poverty are now able to like access a stronger benefit, are able to get more jobs because of foreign and domestic investment is saying. And like goods become cheaper when we see more things being produced in the country because of domestic investment and foreign investment. And so these people are able to access higher standard of living and live better lives and healthier lives, especially when we see like things like investment in infrastructure from the government. And so one of the outcomes we see here, like people are just living way better lives, especially the most vulnerable in our societies, those living on the brink of poverty, those living in poverty, those living in like the lower middle class, who aren't able to access like proper healthcare, proper education, high quality education.
Let's speak now about the aspect of engagement in the open space.
The opposing side stands for mega corporations coming into New Zealand and wiping out small business owners, overall making our quality of life worse. Their burden is to prove why a significant increase would be beneficial, and I'll be disproving that with some rebuttal first of all, before going into my point about how prices, we keep prices low, and then about how we get more tax and the effects of that. Our part of it, we are proving how we keep prices for consumers stable whilst preventing monopoly conditions to occur. Let me start with some rebuttal. They stated that the market would be more stable because they can like rely on that like profit and everything, but it's inherently unstable when you introduce massive sweeping changes to the tax system because it's not a reliable thing. It's not very stable in the first place, so this point is moot. They said that rich people don't spend like all of their money, so they don't really give anything to New Zealand, foreign like services and whatnot, whilst at the same time stating that they get all of their money to like fund all of these services by taxing the rich even more. This point is and they do get taxed, so they are contributing to New Zealand even if they say that they aren't, even if you ignore their contradiction there. They say that rich people will stay in New Zealand because of a high quality of living, air quality and so on and so forth, whereas rich people have many alternatives to New Zealand with even higher qualities of living, like Luxembourg, Monaco, cities specifically made for these people. They stated that there'd be more a pool of investment, so on and so forth. We say that, first of all, this is minor at best when you're marginally increasing the money that poorer people have to buy these staple goods, such as food and whatnot. And taxing the people that run these businesses actually lowers the pool of investment, to get into on my point. And we also say that they said that the nationalized industries that like don't have any businesses doing them. This is like very bad. We've seen historical examples like the USSR running like nationalized food, which caused massive famine. So we do not want this to happen at all. So on to my first point: how we keep prices low. So businesses need to make a profit. They need to like factor in the cost of production. So we need to introduce a tax increase to the people that own these businesses, such as wealthy small business owners who make their income from this. It forces them to raise prices in order to make a profit. And consumers are always going to need the staples like food and water, whatnot, so they just don't disappear. So businesses must turn a profit. So first of all, we don't raise taxes. So as I stated in context, businesses need to make a profit. So raising taxes on these small business owners, the people that make profit from this, they must raise prices in order to actually turn a profit in the first place. They stated that businesses would not actually get a tax increase. So this mainly applies to mega corporations whose owners don't live in New Zealand and make income from that. Therefore, this will be primarily hurting the small business owners in New Zealand who will have to raise prices and therefore will be unable to compete with these businesses that have massive resources from overseas. Second of all, lower taxes on the poor allows businesses to increase their prices even more. When consumers have more income, businesses can raise prices because consumers are more able to afford those goods and services in the first place. They have more money to spend, so they can afford that increase in prices. And based on the profit incentive we have given you, businesses will raise prices without losing consumers because they'll still be able to afford the goods in the first place. The outcome of this is that staple goods and prices will increase. This is especially bad for people on fixed incomes or people without an income in the first place, as they do not have any real income to tax, generally speaking. So they are only going to be negatively hurt by the increase in prices caused by their increase in taxation overall. They'll have to pay more, so the real cost will not have lowered for these goods, for these people, the most vulnerable in our society. Second of all, companies that don't raise prices, the small business owners that attempt to compete, will have to cut jobs in order to still be profitable. So this looks like more people going on to the benefit when they get their job lost, having more stress about finding a job because they've just lost theirs, and that means less tax overall as there are less people earning income to be taxed in the first place. Now on to my second point, which is two-pronged, which is how we get more tax overall. I'll be talking about the overseas immigration incentive and then about tax avoidance. So on to my first point. Millionaires, they obviously want money, right? Like they love money. There's a reason they're millionaires. It's because they wanted to like get all that money. There's a reason they're still millionaires. They just like that money. This does not clash with our business like wanting money incentive because businesses have to compete with each other to get the lowest possible price in order to get those consumers. So even though they love money, they must keep prices low under our system in order to try and make as much money as possible as long as they can turn a profit. So first of all, businesses will start reporting profits overseas. We see this as companies trying to go to Australia and whatnot to report their profits. Australia will have lower taxes on them, so they will report their income in Australia specifically because they don't want to be taxed as much because they want to make as much money as possible. We also say that high-income earners will start moving out because they have the resources to do so in the first place. They have the money to buy a house, buy a plane, get set up in these other countries, so they have the resources to move out, to move to these places with less taxes where they can make more money overall to spend on these luxury goods, which are very expensive, that they care about. On to my second point of this, about the tax avoidance. We also say that people that make lots of money will just start investing into untaxed assets in New Zealand, such as housing, where the income you make from housing is not taxed. What do I mean by this? When you make a profit on housing, it means that you invested into a house that cost, say, $1 million. It increases in price to $1.5 million. You have effectively made $500,000 profit overall. And this is not taxed because we do not have a capital gains tax in New Zealand. So sort of income is not taxed, and rich people will start investing into this in order to preserve as much income as possible. Therefore, they are not actually going to gain any tax money from these rich people in the first place when they're investing into assets that inflate in price without being taxed. So the outcomes of this are many. First of all, there are going to be shortages of higher income workers such as doctors. Doctors who make lots of money, they want to have a very good life, and they're already quite overburdened, so when they make less money, they have an incentive to leave to other places. This means there's more stress on the healthcare system in the first place because they make less profit overall, because there's less doctors working overall. We have shortages already, as we have seen. There's less investors overall, so these investors that make lots of money invest into these businesses to start them up will be leaving New Zealand to go into other places because they simply make less money, they get taxed more. This means there will be less competition between companies because there's less people investing to even start them up in the first place. We also say there will be less tax income from this investment into other assets overall, but before I get into that, I'll take one for your life. So, to continue with my point about less tax income, there will be less tax income as I've stated. So this table is less into healthcare, into infrastructure. So this looks like having poor quality roads, this looks like having less public transport, this looks like having an overburdened healthcare system that cannot cope with the demands put onto it, which is only compounded by the shortages of doctors that I've aforementioned. So this means overall we have less effective services that help less people, especially the vulnerable who, as I've said, are already left worse off by this system. And we also say that their model of allowing foreign investment to come in, whilst I've stated the harms to smaller business, means that overall there are more businesses, smaller businesses in New Zealand closing down, whilst these big corporations such as Amazon, so on and so forth, you can think of these businesses, coming into New Zealand, starting up their own businesses, and trying to establish monopoly conditions because they have the resources to do so in the first place. They have that foreign funding from their already massive assets they own in the States and so on and so forth, to actually lower prices to an uncompetitive level to establish market dominance and then raise prices back up to unprofitable levels to create monopoly conditions, which we say is overall very negative. This monopoly condition will harm a lot of people in New Zealand. Thank you.
Great, I thank the speaker for their speech, and now I'll welcome up the second speaker of the affirming team.
I'll first begin my case with my responses to the engaging team, and then I will then further elaborate on some of the benefits that we see from increased public investment in services in society. Now on to my rebuttal. There seems to be a bit of a contradiction in the engagement team's case. They seem to believe in this concept of a mass corporate exodus of small businesses and large, but then somehow there's foreign monopolies coming in at the same time. So if it is true that people are wanting to leave, which it's not, because there are other reasons why people actually invest in New Zealand, which I will get into in a moment, how are they then also at the same time leaving en masse? This doesn't seem to make sense. Now to why good businesses will not leave New Zealand, is still likely to occur in New Zealand. This is because when we look at the nature of solely based on the largest amounts of profits. The reason why this is the case is because investors are more focused on risk. They are risk averse. They don't want to lose their investment. This is why we see people currently investing in New Zealand. Around the world, there are other places where they have the potential for many higher returns. You could make businesses which would be quite profitable, but however, the reason why people do not invest in these places is because there is high risk. You're not going to invest in a place if the next day you don't know, possibly a band of warlords will come along and take away and lose all your money. hence why people choose to invest in New Zealand, because it is a stable country and there is low risk that something crazy is going to happen. You're going to lose all your money. This contrast with the claim that the litigation team has made that somehow these changes. This is simply not true. Not really a new system. We're not uplifting anything. We're simply expanding an already existing and rather simple progressive tax system. It's not really something that's going to cause the bunch of mayhem which has been claimed for the engagement team, which is completely unsubstantiated. As we've said, we're simply adding more tax brackets, so the poorest of the poor don't have to pay as much tax, and the rich who have more money, more disposable income that they can afford to pay tax on, they will pay that tax, and we will use that tax to benefits. What does this look like today? We have businesses who are still creating employment, still investing their money, continuing to grow the economy, and we're not seeing any adverse harms of them leaving. And we can see this to be true because if they did actually, solely care about, where they could make the most amount of money and where taxes were lower, taxes, there are countries overseas where taxes are lower, but this doesn't simply mean that all the corporations in New Zealand leave, do they? Because if they did solely care about that, well then they would be here. We wouldn't have any businesses and they would all go off to some other country. This is also true how there are other countries around the world that also have high tax rates, but they still have companies operating in them, proving that tax rates are actually only a very small factor of why companies choose to operate in countries. Furthermore, we have they've made the claim that this is going to really negatively impact the poorest of the poor, but this is not true. The reason being is because with this progressive tax system, we actually on those who have very little, so they can actually afford to buy more goods that they need to survive, such as food, staple goods that were mentioned. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding when they claim that businesses need to raise prices to increase profits. Rather, businesses need to they raise prices when there's an increase in cost. It doesn't actually come off that comes off operating expenditure. That's not really from the profits. The businesses are still making profits regardless. They just keep slightly less of those profits. But in our alternative case, with the increased public investment, which I will further expand on, we actually see these businesses with lower costs. So there's, in our report, there's actually the possibility for same profit margins to be maintained while the government actually is able to spend more money to better invest. Reasons being public investment in things like infrastructure, utilities, electricity, which makes up a big cost of businesses, and that can save them more money. So there's not actually any need for businesses to raise prices at all. So that is unlikely to occur. I'll take that point of information.
How does your side prevent profits from being reported overseas, which takes away any tax benefits from New Zealand?
Well, they're not going to. Well, they can't. Okay, in the case that they've brought up before, which I'll now respond to, about the possible tax avoidance surrounding people investing money in housing and things like that. That is a fallacy because to have that money to invest in housing, which people regardless of any side of the house, they have the money that they use to invest in that house and then get reap the capital gains. Well, the money that they used to buy that house was taxed, so that money still gets taxed. People can try to get through legal loopholes, but land revenue deals with that and has a way around that. We think it's quite realistic that a government department can close off loopholes. Again, if this was the case and people were truly motivated, well, wouldn't businesses just avoid paying any tax at all by somehow moving their profit overseas? It's not actually practical to try to set up offshore accounts in the Caymans and things like that. It's actually quite expensive, impractical, so it doesn't do that a lot realistically. Now that's all I've got for my rebuttal at the moment. I'm going to just quickly expand on some of the points that were brought up at my first speaker. We've stated that this is going to increase public benefits. More on public services and investments. So what this looks like is increasing investment in healthcare, so people have better health outcomes, asthma, less heart attacks, live better lives. Better education, this is very important to the economy. We're able to invest more in education and educational services. People will be able to be more productive, people will be able to generate more money, we see more growth, and then again, this is all coming from capital that otherwise wouldn't be used, because this is largely, as stated, these wealthy people do not use up all of their money. But, they spend some of it, but there's money there that can be used. Things like infrastructure, paying public servants more, this is very important. We need nurses, doctors, teachers, firefighters, police officers. They'd see that, why don't they just go overseas? Well, of course, that's why we should pay them more, and hence why we won't see that exodus under that side of the house. And for those reasons, I would encourage you to take the cause of support and benefit of all society that you support our side of the house. Thank you.
So after the speaker presentation, I'll welcome up the second speaker of the debate.
Compare around all the outcomes of a good health system, perfect education, perfect tax system, but this falls apart at the point where they cannot actually get to these outcomes. Throughout Riley's speech and throughout my own speech, we have and will show you how ACT doesn't get these benefits on our side, we do. Okay. To do this in the do three things. Firstly, I'll do some rebuttal on 3 points. These are government investment, secondly, small businesses, and thirdly, consumer benefit. Then I'm going to move on to some comparative, which will be throughout my rebuttal. And finally, I'm going to go on to my split, which is how this actually creates far worse harms and gets no benefits in a backsliding democracy. Right, so firstly on rebuttal, through the first point, which is what we heard about government investment, right? We heard essentially this line of more tax is more money. On our side, this side of reality, we told you that this just does not work. What we see already is huge amounts of tax avoidance, tax evasion. Under their side, this just becomes way worse, actually to the extent where you see less money coming into the government overall, which is our side, right? More money. Okay, so what we heard in response to our material is that businesses can't move overseas, they're not likely to. Look, we told you in most states, businesses have help from the government in some right? So businesses, businesses not claiming back GST rather, businesses, you cannot claim as much benefit from businesses as you are trying to. Thirdly, we heard this idea that the money leaves New Zealand because rich people are spending it on luxury goods. We tell you that this is like a uniquely New Zealand example, right? Because New Zealand is very unique in the fact that we don't produce a whole lot of luxury goods. We do, not ones that like New Zealand billionaires would be interested in purchasing. We tell you that this falls apart in literally any other country where most other countries are producing luxury goods in their own right that rich people will afford. And so therefore this point is also just a bit of a red herring about the money leaving New Zealand. We'll tell you more about this in our point about business exit. Right, okay. Secondly, on small business, and I think okay, so we heard that domestic investment is like a really good thing for small business. This is really just the first point in disguise, right? Because they're just saying, oh, okay, more money in the government is actually how we just get all these perfect things, a perfect state, a utopia. We tell you in reality, this doesn't work. But why specifically does this not work for small businesses, right? They try to tell us that they're going to have this state-funded energy, or like state will invest into energy and it just makes it cheaper for businesses. No, we tell you this is not realistic. Why would they give money to businesses that they are taxing under their side, right? So even if we buy the fact that there's like it's going to be cheaper for small businesses to operate under their side. We tell you that when you incorporate the taxes, that they will, the more inevitable, like higher amount of taxes that they are being presented on their side, we actually just see this net negative for small businesses. They lose this point, lose the debate. Even if tax is proportional, we tell you that small businesses just don't have the profit margin that big companies do to afford to pay the tax. So this essentially leaves small businesses especially, but also large businesses, with three options. We told you what these three options are. Firstly, they raise their prices. This just gets tagged right onto the consumer's price tag at the grocery store. We see this as a huge harm on their side. Secondly, they just close up shop, leaves the market open to big companies that can afford to pay high taxes to come into New Zealand. We told you about this on Riley, but very little rebuttal. And thirdly, their final option is literally just to move country. Right. So we did hear some rebuttal on this, but I'll get into my third point about consumer benefit. Okay. So they said that it's just better for consumers once again because the state has more money. We tell you that not only do the poorest of the poor still pay taxes on their side, they actually end up footing the bill of a lot of rich people's taxes. Because we tell you that these people are rich because they come from a business, right? And in these businesses, when they have higher expense, what do? They just take it right onto their price tag, and therefore the poorer that someone is, the more likely that they're actually just going to be paying all the taxes of these richer people. This is a huge harm on their side, one that we can't let stand. Finally, we heard this whole point about if they're likely to leave the country, why don't they just do this right now and go to tax havens like the Cayman Islands, like Switzerland, like Ireland? Look, you can't defend this under the status quo by just saying, there are three places you can go to, right? Because under their world, in a world where somewhere like New Zealand has a higher tax, literally any other country is going to have a lower tax. So this debate doesn't become about our businesses likely to pack it up and go away to Switzerland, where I'm sure there's a huge market for whatever good they're selling. This debate actually becomes about, is a New Zealand business likely to just move to Australia, move to the United States? Okay, so we have written this we have this incentive system about why businesses are likely to move. Example equation, right? Businesses are likely to move if the cost of moving is equal to the tax that they save over an arbitrary period of time. We'll say 10 years. We tell you that even if you give it more than this, it's still good for businesses, right? So the cost of Australia would have much lower taxes than New Zealand for these businesses. It becomes suddenly so profitable, so easy for them to go to Australia. They would save huge amounts of money. I'm going to move on to my point now, but firstly I will say that.
Do you recognise any of the mechanisms you gave your first and second as to why businesses have lower running costs within New Zealand?
Sure, I just don't agree with them because you get negative when these businesses are paying higher taxes, right? Okay, on my split about how this particularly harms backsliding democracy. What is the context? In these countries which have democracies which are backsliding, rather than just in the form of buying up land assets, you straight up see tax evasion. This is a huge problem under the status quo. It's symmetric, but under their side, it gets far worse. So, a bit more context. Government and business in these countries are tied together because by definition, they need to be to control the people. On their side, it becomes, even if they can get this policy across the House in a backsliding nation, it just doesn't get enforced, right? Three reasons why the government is not able and not keen on enforcing this policy through their big businesses. Firstly, they have to keep companies on their good side, right, to control the people. Secondly, companies often donate money to the government in really unethical fashions in these countries, in these places where their side just doesn't stand. And thirdly and finally, the government just because the IRD in New Zealand, it doesn't really do a perfect job. Under their side, this workload just doubles and the scope even in a country like New Zealand, we were willing to consider as much corruption as other nations. So in these nations with corruption, there is essentially no incentive for the government to enforce these laws, and also there is no ability of the government to enforce these laws. On their side, you get this overall net negative to a huge extent to any country which has slight corruption in their nation, right? Let alone to these very corrupt nations. We tell you that these countries will be severely harmed by their proposal. We tell you that these are precisely the countries that we should be looking to care about on an international scale, on a global scale, right? Okay, so I told you that it is so likely that businesses are going to do this because A, it's profitable, so therefore they have incentive. B, it is just so easy to do this because literally any other country in the world would have a lower tax rate and whatever country is raising their tax rate to a more progressive tax system. Okay, so we would any invest in education, invest in healthcare. The business just doesn't stand. We've given you tons of material, tons of mechanisms on how it just doesn't work, how your side just does not get the money to the state. We haven't heard this responded, and you cannot claim any of the wide benefits that you tried. Thank you.
So I think the speaker for this speech, and I'll welcome up the third speaker for the affirming team.
Now, our model said that we're going to do tax brackets, more increments of tax rates based on how much companies are making. Now, long-term tax brackets don't get taxed. They get taxed less than the current tax structure. Those who are operating and we add this extra tax value on top, those extra higher earners. Now, I'd like to start off with some rebuttal, more so about their misinterpretation of how our model works and how they use that against our case. Now, they simply said that businesses will raise prices simply because they'll have less revenues, therefore they'll increase their prices. Okay, say, well, this is not true. Well, because companies are still making a profit. Even if the thing that drives up the cost of product, materials cost and how much not how much revenue is because the price based on overall how much money they're making. We're talking about how much they're making after deducting operating costs. Now this means that these companies won't go into net negative and make no money, but still making money. There's no issue there. They're still going to be making a profit. Now another thing is these small businesses who we're focusing on will actually benefit under our model simply because they'll be on the lower end of the profit-making spectrum, right? Because of that, they'll be actually paying less tax because what we're focusing on is increasing taxes for these bigger companies, these larger companies, not these small, mom and dad businesses in your local town. Now, they simply stated that these businesses will just leave New Zealand and all go over to Australia without even getting any cost to Australia. Taking much higher education, they disincentivizes moving simply because setting up finding new workers, renting out a new place, getting used to different customers, that'll cost lots of money. Time where why would you simply do this when you can still make a profit in New Zealand? And that would be completely moving the whole idea that New Zealand is still a big market, right? You still have lots of people, and a business wants to sell their products to lots of people. So it doesn't really matter how much the tax rate is in that country because you're only paying the tax of how much you make in that country. So if they're making, let's say, $20 in New Zealand, and there's a relatively higher tax rate, and they get a chunk taken off that, they're still making a profit, right? So why would a company just simply move? You're making money, and then you decide to not make money and simply change to another country, and you can operate in other countries. And that's why it's unrealistic that I think that companies and businesses will just avoid going to New Zealand altogether, or simply move from New Zealand. It just makes no sense logistically speaking. Now, he also talked about these monopoly-like conditions. After businesses move out, we'll have these giant American conglomerates coming into New Zealand and setting up. I just think this is ridiculous because that would be monopoly laws apparently. To stop competition from buying out that whole competition, please.
Don't we already have monopoly in the supermarket industry?
No, it's new supermarkets on there. Monopoly is one giant conglomerate controlling all the supermarkets. Well, that simply isn't true. We have Pack and Save World Countdown. That sounds like multiple businesses to me, not just a single shopping chain. And that's what I'm saying. Now, and even if we disregard any of the, if we say that monopolies these protections that we have, that's why we have this anti-monopoly laws. Operate in a fashion where they like reduce the amount of they potentially fine or even potentially penalize with prison time to certain people who are doing this way too far. Now, another thing is I said these doctors are high earners to keep them from New Zealand because of the increased tax rate, but I just don't think these people are earning quite enough under the status quo to really be affected by any such increase in tax, simply because we're increasing tax rate to higher earners. Not like doctors in New Zealand are under status quo due to our lack of tax evasion is illegal. There is crime, prison time involved. The way it operates under the status quo, this is currently how operating our world. Tax evasion is an illegal practice and shouldn't be done. And I think prison time is a pretty big disincentive to to get potentially severely penalized in a country where you have profit. Now, I'd like to go over why we want this today, simply because we talked about why we see more domestic and foreign investments in New Zealand and how that's different. Now, for domestic and foreign investments, I think simply because we're getting more tax money from the United States, we're seeing more money being put into infrastructure and local now, simply because we see better infrastructure, we see low operating costs for every business. If you have roads that are fully functional, rubbish, you would see your trucks get around faster, you have less damaged goods, lowering your operating costs. If you have people that can live, that can more easily get to a place with better public transport, those people won't have to live residency for your factory. So all these things, how much is good? Because while yes, you're being taxed maybe because you're a big company, but overall you have less operating costs. What that also means is that you won't worry about having to update infrastructure around the area you're planning to live. In the middle of now, we want to see more business in New Zealand because competition is a good thing. It means more competitive prices for consumers. It means more variety and choice for consumers. Now, because these countries are not offering costs, they can more easily influence themselves in New Zealand, and that is simply a good thing. Now, this means we see domestic businesses and foreign businesses simply performing better under as more. And this is simply why we want this debate. These are benefits for people where they pay less tax, and get more jobs due to increased business, and more education due to more funding in our
Thank you for their speech, and I'll welcome up there, please.
on their side now. We've told you from first why this is not true and this is not being engaged with enough. But secondly, even if you do not buy our case, right, their case also hinges on such a large surplus of money from this huge income tax that they can fix everything, all of the current issues, and implement all of this new policy without any harm to their side of the house. They have not explained this enough, and this is why they do. But firstly, why does our case still stand in this debate? So what have they told us on raising prices? This is one of our key grounds, and here's what they told us. They told us that basically, this is what New Zealand is raising their prices, and this kind of won't. Firstly, we tell you that businesses are unable to lose customers, therefore they are by nature going to want to make more profit. They have no reason to not raise prices when they are and therefore they will be raising their prices. Secondly, even if it does go raising prices, largely those not allowed in large bases are a necessity, and this is just like they already have competitive markets, so this just really falls away. And thirdly, what must they be doing in order to still be making a profit for them if they are not raising their prices? If their taxes are going up, but they're not raising their prices, what they always tell you they're doing is tax avoidance, they're moving overseas, we're providing all of these other reasons which have not been engaged with. Secondly, on this, they told us about tax evasion and how the IRD was able to deal with it. First of all, we see a big difference in clarification here on avoidance versus evasion. One of them is legal, one of them is not. We see from those people are not going to be straight up committing crimes, but they are likely to be buying up large portions of land so that they are not taxed. This was not engaged with, and this is why we win. Second point, this does not work in weak democracies. This is actually a huge part of the world. It is still super important in this debate. And thirdly, it's not dealt with under the status quo. How will they deal with our so moving into our first point of class here on domestic business. Basically, I just told you all the reasons why it doesn't work, but even if you go by any of what I've just given you, here's why we still win this point. It is more profitable for businesses to import to New Zealand than for New Zealand What do we see on the other countries not having this tax rate? And therefore, it is more profitable to just import and still sell to the New Zealand market. But on the other side, you have businesses able to do this without being taxed, and then New Zealand sees none of the profit, none of the income, and therefore none of the benefits that they have tried to create. And then let's just go New Zealand market and economy, everything just goes great, right? What is it? This has a huge harm to our environment, right? Because then people are going to be wanting to build factories, businesses, they're going to be wanting more workers, and this underlies their entire case where they tell us that the rich stay in New Zealand just because New Zealand's like a really pretty place, like low tax, that would fall away. Secondly, if our environment also falls away, there is this is not quite.
Earlier you stated about it being difficult for government to collect tax use the IRD. If it's all done electronically through robots, how much difficult is it actually?
Look, we see this just coming in way too late in the debate first. Well, this is not being brought up first. It's just like a very late response that does not tackle the key issue. The IRD does not deal with tax avoidance, they deal with tax evasion. Tax avoidance is legal, that is why people do it. They have not provided the reason why this will not happen on their side of the house. So, in foreign markets, 20 plus year, they basically told us that won't go overseas because they can still make a profit here. We tell you that firstly there's less competition and it is more expensive to set up and run a business in New Zealand, and therefore this means less disposable income for New Zealanders. This will come in into stakeholders as well. Secondly, on this, right, we see they're able to make more money overseas when they're not being taxed as highly overseas. They also have a huge profit, therefore they have the ability to move overseas. When they have incentive and ability, they will do this. Secondly, right, even if only some individuals move and only the individuals this is still bad for us because we see a huge portion of our income tax coming from the highest percent of those. When these owners can move to a major country in the EU, right, which still has beautiful scenery, beautiful nature, and now also lower tax prices than us, they are highly likely to do it and none of their benefits. Thirdly on this, this point of tax rate that in your worst case, right, government can just produce like a national market for goods. They can just like provide goods. If they admit that businesses will move and governments will have less tax by definition here, then the governments will have no ability. Okay, moving into my third point of flash now on the stakeholders. We just heard a little bit of discourse here, but I'm going to tell you why we do benefit more and why we do it and will benefit everyone. Now, firstly, they've told us here, this has kind of been through my whole rebuttal, but basically, to sum up their case, they've told us that most of their income to live. They've told us that poor people will just somehow have more income and be able to live what they want. Let's just anyway, we see this being worse on their side. On how New Zealand will not actually make a profit when we tax our rich, when we tax companies, when we force them overseas, we force them to do more tax work, to buy up more land, and to raise the prices for the poor. They have not engaged with the raising prices for enough. I've already explained why companies will still be incentivized to do. Therefore, they cannot raise any of their benefits for poor people. If anything, poor people are worse off on their side of the house because companies will be raising prices. They will be forced to spend more of their income on these goods, and therefore they are worse off on their side of the house. They then told us that the rich don't spend all of their money and that they just spend it on luxury. Okay, well, first of all, we tell you, yes, this is true. Everyone agrees on this. This is how the rich get rich, right? This is what this is the most important thing, profit and maintaining those profits. They've given us no reason why they would give up a significant portion of their income to income tax, and therefore this point does not stand. And also, there was no real benefit on their side of this anyway. Then the next point on this is that they told us that investors and the rich are very risk adverse, right? They come to New Zealand because they know they can something about warlords, Central Africa, but the examples we gave you are much closer to home, right? They're more likely to go to Australia, which has an established market, which does not have very extreme cases that they want. They did not bring a realistic example, a hugely mischaracterized that case. And we've told you all of this. New Zealand currently is great for them. They have large tax. This is good for everyone. It's good for the people because although we are not draining people 100% of their wealth, we are still getting income tax on them. On their side of the house, we lose all of the tax, we lose all of the benefits, and we gain all of the harm. We're what you stop us, and that is why we win this debate.
Also, I think the speaker for their speech, as is customary, will reverse the speaking order, so I welcome up the leader of the meeting to begin their reply.
NAF has to get up at third and reinsert their model with as little justification as we were given the first time. I'm sorry, too little, too late. You cannot shift it back here. Likelihood of business to move to other countries, of that, countries. Secondly, the net benefit to consumers, and thirdly, the effect on small businesses. Look, firstly, on the likelihood of businesses to move. We said right at first, yours is a world where businesses have no incentive to stay, and suddenly actually becomes incredibly profitable to just up and leave. We told you that these people are also very likely to be able to leave because, as both teams know and have stated, these people are mega rich. What we heard as this push is that they are unlikely to move because it's impractical, logistically it just doesn't work. Unfortunately, we already told you why, creating in the form of an objective equation, an objective system as to why these incentives work on businesses, why this is unlikely to happen. We told you in my second why likely businesses could find it profitable to leave the country is made, it suddenly becomes incredibly easy. They are likely to do so. Unfortunately for ACT, they lose this point here when they cannot prove that businesses are unlikely to just leave and cause absolute economic devastation to the supposed utopia that they are bringing us through their side of the house. Look, a bit more before I move on to the other points of clash, just about the type of case that each side ran here. When ACT doesn't run a globally scaled case, our split, like alone, stands on this, and we will told you this in my speech, our impact business illustrates this a lot, but also centered around New Zealand examples, what we see is that it doesn't stand for any of the other countries where it is much easier to just leave. We see this in places like France when they run a wealth tax and they just run away to Spain. It happens incredibly easily. Look, also the other type of case that the opposing side runs here is inherently right? Unfortunately, you don't have enough material, not enough response to ours even, about why you get to these outcomes, how you actually get to them, and why our side doesn't stand. But on to the second point. Next is benefit to consumers. We told you what happens when you increase businesses' expenses. They raise their prices. Because as both sides can agree, even if we're talking about like mega conglomerates here, these people are accustomed to their lifestyle. They are accustomed to their just for the state, let alone the small businesses who literally cannot afford to take a huge pay cut to the state. But I will get on to that in my second point, guys. We told you why both of these like different types of businesses, both with different sectors, are incredibly unwilling and unlikely to just take a huge pay cut, take another massive expense, therefore pass the expense on where they can. Therefore, you get a worse outcome than the status quo, let alone not achieving all of the benefits, the utopia that you try to. Look, once we win this point, we move on to the next point. I told you right at the start that what happens when you see the incredibly viable, incredibly likely, and cause huge harm to society. And like an incredible IRD that does its job every time. Perfect system, you put it on the other side. Thank you.
Also, I think the speaker has speech about that reply. We told you that we see a larger market, people have more disposable income, we have a stable government, and like investors are very risk averse, they don't want to lose their investment. We told you we have better public infrastructure which lowers running costs. We told you that they were still going to be able to make a profit. Where they pay, $1 million regardless whether or not you make $10 of profit or $2. And then no result other than, the US decided and that one didn't work too well. There's no actual mechanisms as to why this wasn't an effective means of recovering some of those harms we might see. They actually came out with any of the mechanisms required, but they didn't try these factors too. Alright, what did they do? What did we see in legal? Because they continue to operate in the market and you were talking to those sectors that they're not actually going to be committing tax evasion really avoidance. But if they are committing tax evasion, like the idea will definitely be in prison and as we told with the if it's more profitable for them to leave, then they'll leave. It's more profitable. Why are you getting to go? Fail to see an adequate because as we see a huge increase in tax budget for the government, and then because of that we see all of the benefits that we listed we gave you. It's first, second, we see better social mobility, we see better education, we see better healthcare, we see better outcomes for the entirety of society by increasing these tax rates, and we've failed to see an adequate